Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Happiness in Humans. Can't even say my own name of the own podcast. My name is Matt Phelan. I'm your host today, and I'm here with Kevin Green. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Kevin, please introduce yourself in your own words to our listeners.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Green. I'm the Chief People Officer here at First Bus, which is part of a FTSE 250, 14,000 employees, sort of 1.2 billion turnover. I've been here for 3 years. Prior to that, I ran the REC, the professional body for the recruitment industry in the UK, for 10 years. Prior to that, I did 5 years as the HR director at Royal Mail, pre-privatisation. And before that, multiple jobs in HR. And I've had a bit of an eclectic career. So I've been a sort of a business person, been an MD, been an entrepreneur, HR director of a FTSE 100. So yeah, I've had a pretty eclectic career. So I'm sort of business and people. They're the things that fascinate me and have inspired me throughout my career.
Kevin, before we go into the questions, there's just a bit I want to pick up there on the eclectic career.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've also been in the recruitment industry. Sometimes when I'm talking to friends or colleagues or people I've met, they'll want to switch. They want to switch lanes. Maybe they're in HR and they want to move into something else, or they're trying to get into HR. And sometimes the recruiters say, "Well, you can't do that because you don't have the experience." Have you got an advice for anyone that's listening around, like they might want to get into HR or out of HR, how they could use skills to do that?
I think there's a couple of things. I always say to graduates or people early in their careers, don't get obsessed about your professional discipline. Think about opportunities to manage people early in your career. Get some line management experience, go into sales, go into marketing, go into finance, doesn't matter. But I'm a great believer. And if I look at CVs, I really value people that have had a diverse career. And I'm particularly in terms of HR people, I'm always looking for people that have been in the line. They've been a leader, they've managed teams, they've managed performance. And for me, that's really important. So I think, first of all, it's quite difficult late in your career if you're an HR director and you're on a top tier, I wouldn't mind having a go at marketing. Well,
Yeah.
it happen. So I think what you've got to do is to demonstrate early in your careers that you're able to carry out a leadership role. And for me, leadership is leadership. The management of people is the key for anyone to be successful in business. So from my perspective, I saw I put something on LinkedIn last week, actually, a really good article by Richard Halpin, who runs HomeServe, talking about HR directors should be considered as the potential CEOs of the future. And this was because the stuff about managing organizations and leading people, the skills that a good HR director or chief people officer have are most probably more important in the strategic mix of running an organization now than they've ever been. So it's not easy, but I think really make sure that you don't get I'm also interested in, I suppose you can ask me a question about happiness. One of my things that makes me happy is variety. I don't like to be pigeonholed. I don't like to be constrained. I like to be able to play a role. And I see myself as part of the leadership team of the business, not just the HR person or the people person. I'm actually running a business with my colleagues. And I think there's some HR directors that want to be quite distant and want to stand off. And I think you've got to be all in. I think you've got to lean in to the organization that you're running.
I love that, Kevin. You touched on variety and your happiness, but tell us what makes Kevin Green happy.
Well, there's lots of things. I mean, it's all the standard stuff. I'd say family, friends. I'm sort of quite outgoing, so I like to engage with human beings. I suppose music, reading, the traditional things. But for me, it is about that variety. I like my holidays. I like being with friends and family. I like a bit of solitude. I like to be able to read on my own. I like to be able to listen to music. So for me, I suppose it's about something about using all your senses, really. It's a matter of not doing the same thing every day in, day out. That's when I find I'm not at my best. I'm at my best when I can create some variety for myself. Start a bit late, do some exercise in the morning, leave the office at 4:30 and listen to some music on the way home. And the reason for that is that's when good ideas pop into my head. That's when I solve problems. I'll be sitting there going, how do we handle that situation? Might be a union dispute or an issue about how do we think through a really tough problem in terms of how we structure the business. And all of a sudden, an idea will come into my head, and it will be when I'm not actively thinking about it, it's when I'm doing something else.
That my favorite advert that I've seen in the last 5 years was from the bath store, and they were selling, ironically, bath store selling showers, but I just saw it on the back of a lorry. It just said where your best ideas come from, it's that concept, isn't it? Like the shower is one of the one places where you can actually get where nobody's disturbing you. There's no phones, there's no technology, there's no one saying, "Oh, can I have a word?"
Yeah, but I think it's also about the human brain, you know. I mean, one of the things I often say to young HR people or young people in business, I'm doing a presentation to our graduates this afternoon. I'll say is don't react to everything. Sometimes just sleep on stuff, right? You know, that, you know, go to sleep in the evening and you wake up and think about it in the next morning. And somehow the processes and your mind's been working on stuff. And you'll come up with oh, we could do that. Or what about that? You know, and so I'm a great believer in not reacting to everything in the moment, but really reflecting, giving yourself a bit of time away, and you'll come up with a better answer.
Have you always been like that, Kevin? Because I've had to learn, and I have to I still tell myself that to sleep on it, to wait. I'm very instinctive. Are you naturally like that, or have you learned that through your career?
I think I've learned it, and it comes from, you know, I made some mistakes early in my career. I'm quite an emotional person, and I can react to things, and I can react in the moment. And one of the good things is I can think on my feet. I'm quite agile. I'm quite adaptive. However, sometimes when someone says something and it just pushes a button, you know, what you read, or even an email. Sometimes you get an email and go, God, you know, and you want to respond. You start typing. I go, I'm going to send that tomorrow. Right? Just leave it. And then you come to it the next day and you go, oh, okay, you're much more balanced, you're more thoughtful. And actually, what you're really trying to do is just present yourself and in the best possible way. And I think doing everything instinctively isn't always the best way to do. So I think it's a learnt behavior.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I've learned that the hard way myself. I wish I'd met you a bit earlier in my career, Kevin. On your career, just quickly, have you had a time in your career where you've been unhappy, Kevin, in your work and where you've been?
I mean, there are always times, I think, when things are tough, you know, when you're doing something which isn't easy, um, I know you're restructuring a business, you're in the middle of a dispute with a trade union. I mean, I tend to pick gigs which are all about transformation. I'm not a steady state HR director. I'm always about either growth or about, you know, transforming from one thing to another. So yes, I have bad days and bad weeks and times when I'm frustrated and annoyed and get irritable. But overall, I think I enjoy what I do. So I think it's always about that balance. You know, I think you've got to recognize that in any kind of transformation or change, that there will be moments where it's not easy and it's difficult and things don't go your way. But in the big scheme of things, you know, if you really fundamentally don't enjoy your job, then I think you should change it. I say that to HR people. You know, quite often leaders in HR go, "Well, the problem is the chief exec doesn't get it, the board doesn't want to do." You choose where you work. If it doesn't work, if they're not interested in people, then you don't have to practice there.
Yeah,
Get yourself a different job. Don't keep banging your head against the brick wall
yeah,
because it's soul destroying and you won't deliver any value.
yeah. I love that. And Kevin, just broadly tell us about your career. I want to touch. You mentioned entrepreneur in there. We don't. Well, that's not HR and entrepreneurs don't normally see those two in the mix. So just give us a bit of take us through it.
I mean, I'm not going to go right the way back to school, but I mean, I left school. I was asked to leave school when I was in the middle of my O levels. So, a challenge for my working class family who thought I'd be the first child to go to university in the family. And I was just interested in sport. So, you know, I didn't go to, and they just said to my parents, he's not really interested, which was fair, absolutely fair. So basically, I went off and my dad told me, you better get yourself a job. And I got a job in a local authority in a planning department. And I think I was still doing my sport. And I got to about 24, 25, and I went, I've got no qualifications here. I'm going to struggle. So basically, I went off and did a ONC, then an HNC, and then eventually I did my CIPD. All while I was in a local authority, I did it in the evenings. So I did all my qualifications, in my, in a mixture of my own time and work time. I then got approached to do a gig as an HR consultant. I'd done a job in HR, but then I got a job to be an HR consultant, someone I knew. And I was about 28, 29, and the non-execs at the time, the guy that hired me, who was the MD, decided he was going to go off and do his own thing and semi-retire. And the non-executive board asked me to run the business. It was a business called QTAB. And I ran it.
You're 28, Kevin.
So I was about 28, and they asked me to step into the fold and be an MD and run the business. It wasn't a big business. We had about 15, 20 people. And I did it for 14 years, and I loved it. So I basically ran a consulting team and the business development team. So that's when I was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The thing I always felt was at some point I was going to go back in and manage a big change project myself, because the frustration of being a consultant and I love being an MD. We created a great culture. We had a great time. We did some brilliant work. We had clients like Unilever and the Cabinet Office and First Choice, Part 2E, and Orange or a client across Europe. Yeah, so we did some brilliant work. And I learned a huge amount about different organizations and what works and what doesn't in relation to people. And I was running my own organization, trying to create a culture and high performance environment. But I always had this hankering to do it. And then a guy called Tony McCarthy, who was the group HR director at BAE Systems, got the job at Raw Mat. And he said, and I'd done a big piece of work to helping him transform his HR function at BAE. And he said, come across and help me with this. So started to do that. And eventually said, we need you to come in. So they created this role called the Chief Learning Officer, which was all the change management, all the learning and development, all the cultural stuff. And I went in and did that within 6 months.
That title is very ahead of its time, Kevin, isn't it? Chief Learning.
It was great because basically they were playing to my strengths. So it was organizational design. We had 2 colleges. The whole HR function was nearly 4,000 people. We had a budget of 157 million. So we had to sort ourselves out as well as sorting the business out. But the transformation we went on, the business was losing £1.5 million a day. It was technically insolvent, and we were trying to, turn this business around. And that's exactly what we did. Adam Crozier was the chief exec, and within 5 years we were making, £700 million profit. And that was the precursor to the privatization. So I spent a huge time in my career doing a lot of change management in a big legacy business. So I loved that, but didn't want to go back and do it again. When you leave something after 5 years, people want to put you back into doing exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I was approached to be the chief executive of the REC, which is a professional body. So, and that played to my strength. So a lot of it was about running a business of 100 odd people, 120 people, I suppose, at its peak, and it had a research arm, it had a training arm. It was a membership organization. It provided legal advice. It lobbied the government. And again, it was a variety. So what I loved about the role was I was a leader. It was a people business or a professional services business. We did a lot of people development in the recruitment industry. But at the same time, I was doing TV and media. And so I did, Newsnight 3 times live, a couple of times with Paxman. I did the Today program and things like that. So I was doing a lot of TV and media because we were the leading authority on the jobs market in the UK. So did that. Then basically 2018, they wanted me to carry on. I decided I'd done 10 years, done enough. So I went plural. So I went and worked with some fast-growing, medium-sized businesses as a strategic advisor or non-exec. I enjoyed doing that. I wrote my book, a book called Competitive People Strategy. If people aren't very good at doing people strategy, which I enjoyed immensely. I was doing a bit of talking, the odd consultancy project, having a whale of a time. And then somebody I knew, Jeanette Bell, who's the MD at First Bus, where I am now, said, can you come in and help us? This was pre-COVID. Can you help me do some restructuring? And then said, my HR director's moving back to, would you come in and just hold the fort? Well, I've been holding the fort for 3 and a bit years now. So, and obviously they made me permanent and I've enjoyed it hugely. It's a lovely business, full of, it's a bit like Royal Mail, salt of the earth people, bus drivers and engineers are the 2 big populations. And, they try and do a great job every day. And sometimes it's the business that gets in the way.
Yeah, that's a fascinating. I want to come back to that, Kevin. Kevin, 3 things I just want to pick up on. I just want to play one thing back to you. I don't know if you know this, even though this is what you just told me. in your I may have got the maths wrong, but in your teenage years, you were asked to leave school because you
Yeah.
weren't into it. With by the time you're in your 30s, you're chief learning officer. There's you must have that the irony of that must you must have thought about that a few times, mustn't you?
Yeah. Look, yeah, I mean, I've had a great career. I'm getting towards the end of it now, but I mean, I look back at it and very fondly, all the different gigs, they've all been very different. But I think what drove it was, I'm very learning focused. So,
Yeah.
I'll have 3 or 4 books going on at any one time. I'm fascinated by architecture. I'm fascinated by sport. I'm interested in lots of different things. And I think that curiosity, I mean, I love business, right? I love trying to understand what makes a business successful and
Yeah.
how you could do what you need to do to improve it. And at the heart of that is nearly always people. It's nearly always about the talent, the leadership, the capability. And so I suppose I was lucky that I found something which I'm hugely passionate about quite early in my life. And then I think it's easy, it's easy to learn, it's easy to develop. You push yourself, you want to be successful. Then, I mean, one of the things I said, I've never applied for a job in my whole career. Every single gig has come to me. It's been people go, "Oh,
Yeah.
we've got an interesting gig. But have you ever thought about helping to, do this or do that?" I go, "Oh, that
Yeah.
sounds interesting."
That's funny you say that because that was one of the things I wrote down to come back to. That was the next bit that I picked up on. People don't come and offer you a job. They ask you for your help. They say, "Oh, can you come and help me on this?" That's the common. Why has that happened? Why is that happening, Kevin? Do you think? If it just to reflect on that for a second, because that's interesting place to be, isn't it?
It is. I mean, what we would now talk about is your personal brand. I mean, I think people, so when I stepped down from the REC, there was like 20 people that wanted to talk to me about potentially helping them grow their business, change their business. And, I had to explore each of those and find what was right for me and whether I wanted to help those individuals. So for me, I think, that whole, if you're doing great work and you're making a difference, people will recognize it and they will come to you and go, "Do you ever thought about helping us do something like this?" Or "We're looking for someone that can help us do that." And that's where you then have to, be discerning and make the right call for you. And sometimes, there've been opportunities that have been put in front of me that, from a financial perspective or from a kudos perspective, you get quite excited about. And then you meet the people and you go, "This isn't one for me."
Yeah.
I know enough of you. The thing that I always say about great leaders and great people leaders, even more so, they got to know themselves first.
Yeah.
That I know where I work at my best and where I won't work well. And, you then got to find the opportunities that fit that environment where you can be at your best.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because that's something that gets chucked back at the younger generation, where they say, well, the people are coming into the workforce with a clearer understanding of what they stand for and what they won't tolerate. Any thoughts on that, Kevin?
I think I think, look, people that know themselves and understand what they want to do and what they don't want to do, as long as it's based on some kind of reflection, it's not just ego. It's not just that I want to be in charge. There's lots of young people that I think they're coming at this from perhaps a materialistic perspective or a job title perspective or the business they want to be in. It's really got to be based on where you can be your best. So I think it's a fair starting point. What I would be saying to people, and I'd say this to people early in their careers all the time, try stuff. You're
Yeah.
going to be surprised. You're not going to know. You don't know because you've not experienced it in reality. So
Yeah.
try lots of things, and then you'll go, "Oh, I like this, but I'm not too sure about that." And I like working with that type of team. And then you go, "Okay, I can start to see
Yeah.
where I shouldn't operate and where I should."
That's that. Just to link another point in there around your reading and your thirst for knowledge and learning, and that point, which is, remember one of our neuroscientists saying that 90% of our behavior is based on subconscious information. And as soon as I heard that, the way that I look at like what you read and what you consume, I see it like food now, because we know, don't we, like what you put in your body, what is really important.
Yeah.
So, but now because that freaked me out. I suddenly thought, wow, I thought I was in control of what I'm doing, but actually, if I believe this person that says 90% of what I do is subconscious, therefore, the stuff that you read and what you consume in the media you've got to be intentional about that, haven't you? And you're obviously going out there and consuming
Yeah.
intentionally.
I mean, one of my business advice I give to young people in their careers is read the FT every day.
Yeah.
It's really well constructed. There's not a lot of political bias in it. And actually, it will teach you about business. You'll understand things just by reading a newspaper regularly about how businesses are run, their objectives, their financial goals, why they're performing, how businesses are valued, all sorts of stuff. And that's hugely powerful. I think that we don't educate people very well. We don't educate people to be great citizens. I don't think we educate. So one of my big things, one of my great podcasts or TED talk was Sir Ken Robinson when he talked about creativity in schools and education. He said we take the creativity out of young people, and I think that one of the things that organisations should be doing is having fun and creating great cultures, because that's when you'll get great ideas, you'll create synergies, you'll get people working. So I think there's a lot that people that are thinking about organizations and cultures need to think about outside of formal business texts. I think you learn military history is really interesting.
Yeah.
There's stuff about leadership and management of teams from sport, psychologists. There's tons of stuff out there, and I think having a thirst for understanding, I think, but also without context. So I don't read stuff to think about what I apply tomorrow. I just read because I'm interested, and some of that stuff stays in there really. So I think you're right. I think it's yeah, what you put in.
Yeah.
People often just don't read, and the obsession with stuff on phones, and actually the problem with most stuff on phones, even in terms of news, it's shallow. There's no
Yeah.
depth to it, and you've really got to go. You've got to teach yourself to get underneath the surface.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's stuff written about Trump. Why is he like that? What drives it? Where does it come from? Well, how was he brought up? What are his values? Where do they? And actually, the deeper you go on anything, that's when you start to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back a little bit to what you were just saying about creativity,
Mm,
something that you were really passionate to talk about, Kevin, which I love.
mm.
It's probably one of my favorite questions I've ever asked a HR professional, which is, why do you think HR gets overcomplicated?
Well, this is I remember when we had our conversation, we talked about this before. The issue is, I think that HR is taught in a very mechanistic way. It is, quite often the CIPD programs and how people learn HR is through this idea of policy and process and procedure. And, from my perspective, do you need policy? Do you need policy? Yeah, process and procedure. Yes, but that's not what drives it. So I think we complicate. I think we are actually a part of the problem rather than part of the answer. I think what we should be focusing on is, you know, culture, how people work, dynamics of teams. I think there's not enough really. Organizational thinking is really always about organization and then individual performance management of the individual and the culture of an organization. Well, yes, but the bit in the middle is teams. And if you look at great tech businesses, if you look at Meta or Google, their view is quite often hire great people, put them together as a great team or as a team,
Yep.
develop them as a team. So the role of leader is to think about how do you bring differing views, different experiences, different mindsets together so that you get something which is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Now businesses don't think about teams in that way quite often. The third thing they always say is the job of the leader is then to get out of the way.
Yeah.
So don't over manage, don't over prescribe, So, for me, there's a lot to be learned from thinking about teams. So I think HR complicates it. I think we like to exclude people. We talk about so HR is often about compliance and about how we ensure that we follow the regs and the legislation. It's about making sure we don't have ETs. It's about making sure that we all follow process and we define the policy. It's about control. It's about control. And my view is great organizations empower people. They put control in the hands of people that want to drive and make a difference. So I think we have to have a long term, I think there's a lot of work that we need to do around the focus of HR.
Yeah, no, it's funny when you were talking, I was linking back to your other point around leadership earlier, and I was thinking about the hardest leadership role that I've learned from in the last few years, which is I coach my daughter's under 11s football team. And one of the things I've had to learn is when it gets to half time and we huddle, to let them talk and just talk it out, because sometimes they resolve the problems themselves before I get in there. And more often than not, when they do resolve it, what they have figured out is better than what I would have done, because although I'm on the side, they're there. They can see, they're smart, they're intelligent, they can see what's going on in the game. They've been taught about pressing and tactic, they know. And it makes them stronger in the long term. So I think that I was just linking your previous point around you can take leadership learnings from everywhere, can't you, and bring them into your business.
The key, I think great coaches, great leaders do the same thing. They ask the right questions at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's what, if you think about coaching, your job is to say, guys, why are we not closing down in midfield?
Yeah.
Or why are we giving possession away too often? And let the team come up with the answer. You're absolutely right. But it's having the right question at the right time to get a change of behavior and the right outcome.
Yeah. So we're gonna go on to the thing that connects us, which is measurement. And what do you mean, Kevin? You're passionate about this phrase, but what do you mean by measuring HR?
Well, look, I mean, we can have a philosophical debate about happiness, but I'm not sure we're going to. So for me, employee engagement. How do your people feel? So we do here. First thing I did is I said we were going to do an engagement survey of the whole workforce 4 times a year. And everyone went, we only ever do it 2 years, and we're now going to do 8 in 2 years. I go, yeah. And this is why, because it's your lead indicator. It's your lead indicator. And we use an emotional quadrant. So we understand, people pick questions about how they're feeling. So I can see engagement, empowerment, and inclusion, and I can see what the emotions are that's driving it, right? So I get real understanding. Now, why do we do it quarterly and why do we do it granularly? So every depot, we've got 70 odd depots. So every depot, every team, now we're doing it 3 times a year rather than 4, but even so, very, very regular, because because leaders, these are your people. This is what they're saying to you about the environment that you're creating. So for me, it empowers our leaders and managers to respond to the feedback from their people.
Yeah.
I also, we've got certainly in previous organizations, I can tell you the relationship between employee engagement and our customer metrics. So our NPS score, our NPS score that then drives customer loyalty and customer spend and customer transaction, which delivers financial results. So the customer service profit chain for me is hugely powerful. And in every organization that I've been in, I go, we measure the people stuff. We can see, we got to go up. We started really low. It was 41%, the second one we did, right? Which is incredible. We're up to 60 and we're still going north, but there's, we want to get up to 70. So there's a long way to go. But what we can see is that is it any coincidence that we've doubled profitability? Is it is it strange that our customer satisfaction has improved as we've started to treat our people differently and more effectively and better? So that's why I say you measure the people, so you measure the soft stuff. Now, my attrition is halved. A lot less people are leaving. My absence has been reduced quite significantly at the same time. Why? Because we're treating people differently. We're treating them as adults. And actually, all of that stuff feeds through to business results, but, less ETs, less union disputes, all of that stuff. So that's why I think you've got to measure religiously what's going on within your organization from the perspective of your frontline staff. What do they love about your organization? What frustrates them? What do we need to change? So I've been doing stuff about refurbishing toilets. We've been doing our depots. We've been buying new buses. We've done a bottom-up change program called People Centricity, which was all about design thinking. So we went out and got great ideas from bus drivers and engineers and frontline managers, fed it into the mix, 300 ideas, broke them down into pots of 30, tried stuff, learned from it, Then we go, right, we codified. These are the 17 things we think we should be doing to have the biggest impact. We then deploy it depot by depot, not top down, bottom up. So you
Yeah.
put coaches into the depot to change things on the ground with managers and the teams. You don't tell them what to do, you help them learn and do it in real time. And that's what's been driving the change of culture and the change of approach, which has given us the results. But measure regularly how your people are feeling.
Yeah, I just want to touch on something you said there around toilets. Specifically on the toilets. And then have you seen Ted Lasso? Ted Lasso,
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan. You can imagine I'm a big fan, can't you? The whole belief stuff is phenomenal. My favorite quote: "Be a goldfish." Right? Why is be a goldfish fantastic? Because it's got a memory of 10 seconds. Just think about what comes next. Don't think about what's happened. Okay, you do want people to reflect and learn, but in reality, clear your mind, go again. And there's loads of fantastic insights from Ted Lasso. Go on, talk about the toilets there.
There's just one thing I want to pick up on, and I want you to coach some other. We get a lot of really great senior HR people listen to this podcast, but some of them sometimes struggle when they see their data and they dismiss stuff that they see in their role as small. So they might be thinking about big change management type things. And in the first episode of Ted Lasso, he fixes the showers.
Always.
He does a survey, doesn't he? And then and that's his first thing. It's like the first trust thing where he fixes something that everyone else has ignored that they think is small. Now, obviously, everyone who's listening probably thinking, well, toilets are not small, but I've seen it so many times where people are like, oh, the employees are just saying like these just like little tiny things that don't really matter. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, but they've told you it matters. So if it's small, that's even better because it's easier to fix. Can you just touch on that point for us, please, Kevin?
It's their feedback. It's what matters to them. So you have to listen. So one of the things we did when we were doing this people centricity stuff, we got feedback that is a really good piece of feedback. Why do managers behind the doors that you have to have a pass to get into get free tea and coffee? We're the lowest paid members of staff in this organization, engineers and drivers, and we have to pay out of vending machines or pay in canteens. Yeah. So we went, well, why is that? And that is quite a deep question. So I went, everyone's going to get free tea and coffee. Now, what I unleashed was some huge change management. So the canteens were up in arms. So they were going, well, look, that's how we fund our Christmas party with all the kids because, people are buying teas and coffees every day. Okay, so we're going to have to find a way of solving that. People then go, well, who buys the tea and coffee for the drivers? We need a fridge and we need a kettle and we need it. So you go, okay, we're going to do it. Now we've done all that. Now the reason why it's important is they gave you the feedback. It was about how they felt about how we treated them. And we showed that we would do things based on what they told us. Yeah. So that's the point. It's about they start to go, oh, they might be serious about this. It feels a bit different. Yeah. And, we've had a leak in this roof for 7 years and no one's fixed it. Number one objective, if you're the manager in that depot, is fix that roof. Because then you go, if we've it for 7 years, we've done it. Right, what's next? And what I keep saying to our managers is when you look at your feedback 3 times a year from your people, pick one issue and sort it. And then you go back, you said, we did. And you keep repeating the process. Yeah. You said that was an issue. This is what we've done. We fixed it. And then they then start to buy in because what they will pick up is you're seriously listening to them and you're taking action to make their life better.
Yeah, I love that. And because we've got you on, I do want to talk about engineers and bus drivers for a second because we don't always get everyone has different types of work. A couple of things I remember from different workforces that everyone will be familiar with. I remember having someone on from fire brigade, and so I want to know something quite unique about bus drivers. I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of the challenges they have when you work with a fire brigade, you're not allowed to be too keen. It's like the worst thing you can be, which is really bizarre when you think about it when you're not in that world. And I remember hearing that, and it's like this cultural thing they have to unpick. Like it's just built into it, and the HR team always fighting against that, like just to make sure people know it's okay to be keen. It's not a problem. The one we have with train drivers, which is maybe a little bit of similarity to bus drivers, but um, you're not allowed to sort of be too happy about your job. And the funny story that I thought was really funny about the train drivers is a lot of train drivers, when they're kids, they want to grow up and be a train driver. So they've actually achieved their dream, which most people don't. Me and you didn't say when we were kids we want to grow up and work in HR and happiness data, but train drivers have actually achieved what lots of people set out as a kid, and they feel really happy about it. But it's like this secret they're not allowed to talk about too much. So they have this like thing to Twitter. And have you got something in the bus drivers that you can share with us that's unique?
Yeah, first of all, they're very similar. There's lots of people that love buses. You know, a lot of our staff, when they go on holiday, take pictures of other buses overseas and send
Really?
me.
I love that.
So there's a lot of that, and people will tell you about the configuration of wheels and engines and everything. There's a lot of people that are fact now. If I look at our data, what it shows is a lot of our people are really happy doing their job. They like being a bus driver. They like the responsibility. They like dealing with the public. They like driving the bus. Particularly our new buses we're changing and we're doing a big sustainable stuff. So we're all going EV and stuff, which is about £100 million investment every year. The bit that's interesting is they love their job, but they're frustrated by the organisation. And they're
Yeah.
frustrated by the organisation because what they're saying is, I do this remarkable thing every day, and they do, and you're stopping me. You bugger up my schedules, you bugger up my shifts, you don't make the environment that great, you don't pay me that well. So I love my job, and actually I'm doing it in spite of you rather than with you and for you. So
Right.
what we're trying to create is one organisation, one culture where we're all in it together. And that starts with what I said, listening to what people have to say and responding to it. So,
Yeah.
we've got lots of things that we get in, we stop. I went to one of our garages, which will remain nameless, and the other day, and it was awful. And it was just a lack of attention to detail and a lack of focus and sometimes you have to make hard calls, and you have to put in the right managers that are going to work with the workforce you've got, and because their job is to make it as good an environment as possible. So I think there's loads in any organization where you really get under it about, because I think you think about a bus driver, you are driving a very heavy vehicle down congested high streets with 70 people on your buses, 70 members of the public, so you've got that whole public service thing, you've got the health and safety, you've got to drive safely, you've got speed, you've got traffic, that's a tough gig. That's a really tough gig.
Absolutely.
So for me, you've got to start off by saying they're the heroes.
Yeah.
They are their heroes, and then the engineers, working in a cold garage underneath a bus doing some, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, tough environment to work in, often under time pressure. So you put all of these things, those two groups of workers are the heroes in our organisation, and the rest of the organisation's here to support them, to make
Yeah.
it as easy and as good as it possibly can be. And then you'll get the buy-in, you'll get increased happiness or engagement, and people start performing. There's a linkage between happiness, your emotions, and how you perform. And that's the key. That's the key driver in all of this stuff.
Yeah. Kevin, because we've got you, I'm going to squeeze another question in because
Go on.
there's a point I just want to pick on there. I walked past the bus at Southgate train station last year, tube station, and the alarm was going off. This bus is under attack. I don't know if you know that's something they were testing or that's new. I'd never heard it before. But one of the top drivers of happiness and engagement is safety. Like your bus drivers are on the front line there, aren't they? They must encounter situations where they don't feel safe. Can HR help people feel safe in some night?
Yeah, there's lots of things. Well, I mean, first of all, there's it depends on, safety. Safety is our number one, priority. So, how you drive the bus, making sure there's no collisions on the road, making sure our drivers get continuous professional development. You have to do 5 days every 5 years, and we're that's really a number one priority. Secondly, though, as you're dealing with the public, so you get antisocial behaviour. Imagine driving in Glasgow
Yeah.
or some of the cities late at night or early morning. People, particularly if buses are late, people get very agitated. They're late for doctor's appointments or work or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with that type of security issue, where So we have to train people in how to deal with the general public, how to
Yeah.
calm situations down, how to, and some of our drivers, are assaulted and stuff. So we have to teach them how to deal with all of that. And then you've got things about, potential fires on buses or incidents on buses and stuff. So you've got to then prepare people so that they can deal with that. So in reality, it's, safety and security is multi-layered in itself. And what HR's got to be doing is making sure people have the skills and the capability and the confidence to be able to deal what's in front of them. Now, 90% of the time you can prepare people, but there are still times when, there's an extraordinary event and people just have to, respond as best they can. And what we do is we do hot debriefs at the time. So, within 30 minutes of an incident, someone will be saying what happened, what could have done, we hit bridges. There's all sorts of stuff. So absolutely, safety is absolutely critical. It's at the heart of the and it also means we look after them. That's what we're trying to say. We want to look after you in every circumstances. These are the rules of the game. These are the ways in which you can deal with it.
Yeah, brilliant. If we've done anything, Kevin, today, I think we're creating more appreciation for bus drivers around the country. So, well, thank anyone listening. You get off a bus, say thank you, because I'm definitely, and the engineers in there. We got about 8 minutes and 3 questions that I want to crack through. And we put this question in because when we had our pre-chat, you told me about an amazing stat how you turn the engagement into like financial impact. So I'll read the question and hopefully you remember what we were talking about, which is, do you have any good stats from First Bus you can share on the impact of your work?
So I would say here's the headlines: engagement from 41 to 60%. Happiness or let's say positive emotions from 36 to 52. However, hard metrics, we've halved attrition. To train a bus driver costs £8,500, right?
Yeah.
To halve attrition saves us tens of £1 million every year. Absence is down by 4%. So we have done incredible things. So I can measure all of the things that we've done, the inputs against those types of metrics. However, our NPS score has gone up. Our profit per bus driver, our profit per bus, our profit per depot has all improved. Now, there is no coincidence. The activity we've done has made people feel more positive. They work more collectively. There's more collaboration. They work in a different way than they did 3 years ago, and that's delivering those results I've just talked about. So, yeah, you've got to measure the people stuff, but you've also got to look at the causation into other metrics.
Yeah, and you actually say that internally in meetings and say we've saved tens of millions of pounds here. Are you saying that?
Well, so I've got when I do our people strategy, I do a strategy map on a page. So I do, these are the 5 or 6 big things HR are going to do next year. This is this is how our people will feel in response to them. This is how we will measure the people impact and the people impacts. So I can show you the relationship between what HR is doing and the top financial objectives on one piece of paper.
Yeah, love that, Kevin. And I think the next question I think you've started to answer here. How can HR get investment and get their ideas on the agenda?
Right. So I'm putting Workday in. That's a £10 million investment in our people systems.
Yeah.
I've had big investment to do the people centricity program. I spent a lot of money on leadership development. We have doubled the cost of the HR function and the budget that I've got. Why? Because you prove yourself, but you've got to build business cases. You've got to have a hypothesis. So my strategy map is a hypothesis. If I do these, or my team, these 6 or 7 things, it will have this impact on the business, which will have this impact on the outcomes, that have this impact on them. So you then go, right, let's do these things. Then you've got to do the measurement. So that's how you prove that what you're doing is having an impact. Then people start wanting to give you more money. So can we get more customer employee satisfaction? Can we get better NPS? Can we get more customer loyalty? So you start to drive stuff in that way. So actually everyone becomes an advocate doing more around the people because they can see the quantification of the business results.
Got it. Do you draw direct lines from those different areas into it so people can see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So final question. This is a big one, Kevin. What is the future of HR?
Yeah, I'm coming towards the end of my professional career. And I'm quite sad because I think the next 20 or 30 years is all going to be about people, right? So if you look at the data about our economy or any developed economy in the world, 75% of the economic value of business comes from intangibles. And what does intangibles mean? It means brand, it means customer service, it means loyalty programs, it means, reputation. Where does that come from? That comes from people. So in reality, there's been a huge shift. The sort of mechanical mindset is dying. People are understanding that talent and culture is what drives business results. And actually, I think we've won the war. We haven't won the battle, but we've won lots of the wars. And I think the direction of travel is HR becomes much more central to organization and business performance. So I think the HR and the chief people officer are going to become bigger, more important roles and demonstrate they add more value. So for me, I think the future of HR, as long as we change our own approach, remember what I was saying earlier, less about process, less about prescription, more about creativity, more about putting people at the center. What we do is really important. It makes a huge difference, not just to organizational performance, but to people's lives. So I think, I'd like to be 28, 29 and starting again. But
well, Kevin, I'm going to on our last point to leave us on that. We're not going to go back to 28-year-old Kevin. We're going to go back to teenager Kevin. It's the day after that they've said to you, maybe school's not for you. Maybe it's time to get a job. If you went in a time machine back, Kevin now met that Kevin. What would you say to Kevin, little Kevin?
I think I'd say two things really. I'd say, don't worry, right? Don't worry about it. Because at that time, I was defeated. Not defeated, but I was deflated. You don't want the school phoning up your parents going in, they say, we don't want him here because he's not interested, do you? It's not feedback you want at 17, really. So first of all, don't worry, you'll be fine. A bit of reassurance will be the first message. Then secondly, find your passion, right? Find your passion. Find your passion. You'll then find what you're good at because they're nearly always the same two things, right? And then just follow it, and you'll have a great. So reassurance, and then about that, really do stuff that you're interested in, that you think is important, that gets you out of bed. We spend a lot of time at work. I'm still up early. I finished late. I think about work at the weekend. It's a time-consuming thing intellectually, but physically when you're not at home doing the things, reading books or being with your family. So make sure you enjoy it, right? And if you don't enjoy it, change it and do something else.
Kevin, that is the perfect place to leave it. You've been absolutely brilliant. Last thing I was trying to say is thank you so much for taking the time to share all this wisdom.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.